Okay, this one is purely for the anatomy nerds among you. This is, I believe, the sphenoid of a gray whale, some large whale. And where my head was just sitting, probably where the pituitary gland of that whale sat, you can see the foramina, the optic nerves on either side. If I zoom out, you can see the greater wing a little more intact on this side, a little less so on the other side. And we are looking sort of from a brain down, a cranial to caudal view. If we come to the side of this amazing whale sphenoid, 6 or 7 feet wide, we can see now on the caudal aspect what look like transverse processes. In fact, the sphenoid is, a somite, is a modified vertebra in a way. And these two big chunky bits, I first thought maybe this is a C1, but these big pterygoid processes are probably so chunky to support the growth of baleen from the inferior aspect of this cranial base. And then here's a big capacious whale nasal cavity with the remnants of a midline attachment for vomer. Just incredibly large, chunky bit of whalebone here. Again, about 7 feet wide. I thought you guys might enjoy. Hope you're having a great week. And may we all leave such wonder and fascination in our wake. Have a great day. So I'm back in Seattle, and I totally wish I had more time with that whale skull on the coast, but it did give me a chance to do a deep dive on comparative anatomy between human skulls and whale skulls. And I think I'm right that I was looking at this swath, this middle cranial fossa of a whale. And what I thought was the foramina, the holes for the optic nerves, likely was a larger composite hole for a specialized structure in the whale called the Tympano-Periotic Complex. Fascinating specialization. Instead of a head like in a human optimized for holding this bulbous brain on terrestrial land in a bipedal situation, in the whale, there's far less emphasis on brain volume, much more about providing a staging area for the baleen, as well as, interestingly, the sense of directional hearing in an underwater environment. So in a human, this little chunky part of the temporal bone, we call it the petrous temporal bone, is the housing for the middle and inner ear. And so this is where the 8th cranial nerve enters the inner ear, and this is where we get our sense of hearing, our sense of balance, etc. That whole housing in us can afford to be fused with the surrounding bone. But have you ever been underwater and noticed that it's harder to localize a sound? Because sound vibrations so efficiently transmit themselves into the bones of our skull, we would have far less ability. We do indeed have far less ability to differentiate between something being louder on this side versus that side because of bone conduction of sound. So whales have solved this problem. What they do is they take this same anatomy and they isolate it vibrationally. And they create this chunky, bony apparatus called the Tympano-Periotic Complex that floats in the center with layers of buffering, fatty tissue, connective tissue suspension, so that the receptive apparatus of the whale's hearing is isolated from the rest of the skull. This may also be why we see not a single big sphenoid bone like we have here, but a central part called the basisphenoid, and then a wide swath that we call the squamosal bone in the whale. So anyway, the whale's skull as being optimized for vibrational isolation of the hearing is a really interesting variation on the theme. So I hope to visit that skull again. In the meantime, check this channel out for more nerdy nerve anatomy stuff. Have a great day.